From Washington, D.C. to the heart of America, welcome to Mark Alford's America. I'm freshman Congressman from Missouri, Mark Alford. And yes, I believe in America. I believe in you folks. And most importantly, I believe that our greatest days as a nation are still ahead of us. You know, each week we take you behind the scenes to share the stories, the news, the legislation, and to meet the great people who are helping shape our wonderful nation. Today, we're talking with a friend of mine, Congressman Jake LaTurner of Kansas. Proudly representing Kansas's 2nd District, Congressman LaTurner is a 6th-generation Kansan. He was born and reared down in Galena. Jake's conservative values are shaped by his faith in God, his devotion to his family. He's got a great family. His love of country. Jake and his wife, Suzanne, have 4 children, Ava, Joe, Maggie, and Gus. Sounds like a Hallmark movie, doesn't it? Jake is a proud graduate of Pittsburgh State University, and during his time in college, he worked for former Congresswoman Lynn Jenkins. Following graduation, Jake went on to work for Watco, one of America's top short-line rail companies. And before coming to Congress, LaTurner served the people of Southeast Kansas in the state Senate. He was also, he helped pass some welfare-to-work reform in Kansas. After that, he served as the 40th Kansas state treasurer. He was the youngest statewide elected official in America. And during his tenure, he returned more than $45 million in money and valuables to Kansas taxpayers. Please welcome Congressman Jake LaTurner.
Thank you for having me.
That's where we insert the applause. Hey!
If you have any listeners left after that long bio.
I remember when you came to our Fox 4 studios with
Absolutely.
the trying to return this money from the
Unclaimed property. KansasCash.com. We'll still
Is
promote
that it?
Yeah, absolutely.
That was a great way to get the money back to people, but also a great way to kind of let people know that you were in office.
I love being state treasurer.
Yeah.
It's one of those. It's really an ideological position. It's a good government position. You want a good manager there, and so you're doing things like asking people to save for their kids' education with a 529 account or find your unclaimed property. It was a great job.
Do you have 529s for your kids?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
You got a great family.
Thank you.
They all came to the White House when the Chiefs came up here.
Yeah, their kids are
to
still
celebrate.
talking about that. They got a picture with Andy Reid, which is prominently displayed in my 12-year-old son Joe's bedroom. No, that was a great day for them. It's fun when they come up. We live in Topeka. I'm from Southeast Kansas, as you mentioned. Live in Topeka, and I haven't missed a weekend yet going back home, just because they're young kids. And
how is that? Because all my kids are grown. Leslie and I are empty
Right.
nesters. This was the right time for me to get in Congress and serve. But you've been serving and continue to serve now during the week away from home. What is that like, being a dad who sees his kids on the weekends?
It's really hard. And we couldn't do it without my wife being supportive. She's a fabulous mother. And when we entered into this, we did it prayerfully. We really thought about it, really discerned, is this right for not me, but is it right for our family? And so we very much view this, and again, I give the credit to my wife, as public service that the family is entering into. I don't think Congress should be made up of exclusively retired people without children. I think you need people here from all walks of life and all different circumstances, and so it's challenging. So I'll tell you what we do. I'm home every single weekend, of course. When we have a week off where we're back home, a district work week, my staff is really good about loading me up. I have really, really heavy days, and then I'll have days with nothing but family time. And I'm insanely protective of my Sundays. I virtually maybe one event a year I'll do on a Sunday. And my Saturdays, I don't go to events if they're not family friendly, and my kids can come along. And so we work through it, but it is challenging. It absolutely is.
Are your kids? My kids were not at all impressed that I was on TV in Kansas City. They're like, whatever.
Yeah.
Are they impressed that you're a congressman?
Absolutely not. No. When I first ran for the state Senate, my older 2 kids were 2 and 1, and so they've never known anything really different. Once in a great while, when we went to the White House for the Chiefs things that you mentioned, they loved that.
And that's because the Chiefs were there, not because you were there.
Absolutely, yeah. We had a hearing this week on UFOs in the Oversight Committee. They thought that was amazing. Short of just a few things like that, they are not impressed one little bit, which is great. I'm just, I'm dad. That's it.
Let's talk. All right, you led us right into this UFO hearing.
Yeah.
I watched a little bit about that. Tim Burchett's all over that.
Yes.
We had a nice little talk on the steps of Longworth last night as we were both waiting on rides back to our places where we were staying. What came out of that testimony?
Well, I didn't quite know how. I'll be honest with you. I didn't really know how to hold it, the topic, because I think clearly there are things out there that we don't know and don't understand. I think that's true. I think what's also true is that the federal government doesn't tell us everything. I think
Right.
that, and we need an open and transparent government. They need to level with the American people. It's part of the overarching problem.
But hold on, I'm on HASC. If
Yeah.
it were some sort of military application, I don't expect the military to be telling us everything that we're developing.
No, I don't expect that either. What I'm suggesting is that if there was, of course, if there are implications to our national security, we shouldn't do that. But if there aren't, then information ought to be released. My point is that we don't understand everything. The government ought to be transparent where it can, and some of this stuff is kind of nutty too. I don't know if you remember Randy Quaid from Independence Day,
Right.
but there are a lot of folks in that realm in this that are really
But these
interested
three
in this topic.
witnesses are veterans. I mean, they
Right.
have everything to lose and nothing to gain with their testimony.
Yeah,
And they're putting it on the line, and they seem very credible.
I thought they were credible, good witnesses. Yes, and again, what we discovered at the end of the hearing is that we need to do more hearings. We need to do more hearings. We need to members of Congress need to be exposed to this, whether it's classified or not, so that we can determine how best to handle this. Because clearly, the administration of both parties over the last several decades haven't done a good job of discerning what to release and what not to release, and the mystery is out there, and the imaginations of people. It's
Have you been in the UFO skiff?
I have not. No.
Well, apparently there is one. But if you go in and you learn what's going on, you can't talk about it.
Right.
So I don't want to go in and find out, then not be able to talk about it.
Yes, I understand that. That's a big problem. Anytime there's a classified briefing, it's a mixed bag. But it's important for us as policymakers to have all the information.
Yeah. You also are dealing with the Hunter Biden investigation.
Yes.
We've got a couple of minutes. I want to talk about that, and we'll talk a little bit about it after the break. But so what committee is that jurisdiction under? Is that
oversight?
And walk us through where we stand now with the investigation of Hunter Biden's laptop, the money that has gone through these LLCs. What is it, $10 million has it been paid out to the Biden crime family, as I call it?
It's over $17 million.
$17 million.
Yeah. So we're talking about 20 shell companies, over $17 million being paid out to 9 Biden family members, including his niece, including the president's granddaughter. And the thing that they can't answer, because I don't think there is an answer to, is what in the world were they doing for these foreign companies? Because we're talking about companies in China, in Ukraine, in Romania. What service was Hunter Biden providing to receive this money? They can't answer the question. What we believe to be true is that it had absolutely to do with influence peddling, his proximity to the then Vice President Joe Biden. What we had last week was 2 whistleblowers. You talk about credible witnesses, very credible witnesses, one a Democrat, one a Republican, but nonpartisan. That's not why they're here. That's not the world they live in. They don't think like a lot of us do. And they came forward and said, we wanted to pursue this and were shut down by the Department of Justice. They confirmed everything that I just told you about the $17 million, the shell companies, the Biden family member payouts. And they weren't allowed to fully pursue this at the IRS because DOJ told them no. They didn't want to upset the, quote, big guy, meaning the president. And so it is absolutely a travesty for us to have a 2-tier justice system in this country. We don't care if your name's Biden. We don't care if your name's Trump. We don't want in this country the Justice Department to be partisan. We want them to in a fair manner apply the law, to fairly investigate people, and go where the facts lead. And we've seen politics time and time again enter into it, and that's not something that we can tolerate.
So what's going to come of this? I mean, this week, Hunter Biden was in court in Delaware for another federal matter. It seems like these layers of onion are being peeled back on the Biden crime family, the lights being exposed in this darkness. I think more Americans, more of the news media is starting to cover it than they did not cover it. CNN, MSNBC.
Absolutely.
They're almost forced to cover it now.
Right.
Where 3 years ago, when this whole thing came out, I remember I was working at Fox 4, the Bobolinsky interview with Tucker Carlson on Fox, the revelation that this Hunter Biden laptop existed and what was on it and how incriminating it was, and no media
You
hardly...
were a crackpot if you're talking about
exactly.
it, right?
Well, you were canceled on social media.
That's right.
If you mention it on Twitter, you got axed.
It's incredibly legitimate. What you mentioned was the charges in Delaware, the plea agreement that they reached. We saw the judge yesterday reject the plea agreement, saying something to the effect of, if you're being investigated as a foreign agent, that we don't want to be a part of shutting that down, because it was a sweetheart deal that the
no
U.S.
one else would
attorney,
have gotten that deal.
no one else
on a
would have
gun
gotten that
charge
deal, and
for
people
lying on a federal gun farm.
people understand that back home. That's not right.
Hey, Jake, hang tight.
Okay.
We're going to take a little break. Thank you for everyone who's listening right now. Congressman Jake LaTurner of Kansas will be back in Mark Alford's America. Welcome back to Mark Alford's America, where we give you a behind-the-scenes look at Washington and let you meet some of the great people helping shape our great nation. Congressman Jake LaTurner of Kansas, a friend of mine. In fact, we are often on the same Southwest flight out of New KCI, which is a nice airport, by the way.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was super nice. Lots of barbecue options.
It's just nice to have a working restroom in an airport.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's something that I'm pro working restrooms.
It kind of gotten to be like I won't even.
Well, they kept reducing services at the old ones, and you'd go in there and everybody's sitting on the floor and you can't get a bottle of water, and it was a mess.
It was like a Greyhound bus stop is what it turned into.
People don't care about this as much as we do, because
know.
we're traveling so much that
is.
You start to care about when you board the plane and your access.
You kind of get it down to a science, though, don't you?
Absolutely.
About when to get there. To get a good seat, especially on Southwest, you got to get a good boarding number.
That's right. Yeah, and I figured it out. I travel with a backpack exclusively.
Yeah.
Very small traveling. You got to be agile so you can get around.
Let's get back to Hunter Biden.
Yeah.
Where is this headed? I know Kevin McCarthy has mentioned impeachment inquiry.
Yes.
I think given the circumstances, given the evidence that has come out so far, with the testimony of Devin Archer that's coming about, it just seems like there's so much mounting evidence, and for some people to just turn a blind eye to what's going on and the level of compromise that the President of the United States has subjected himself to with communist China and Ukraine and Romania and these other countries, especially communist China. This is a threat to our national security.
Yeah, absolutely has national security implications. I think the speaker has been very responsible with his language around this. And the reason I think it's so important, and he knows how important the way he frames this for the public, he knows how important it is, because we shouldn't use impeachment flippantly. We saw under this last administration how impeachment was treated. This is serious stuff, and we should not impeach people. We should not impeach our presidents, or anyone for that matter, without good cause. And what we've said as Republicans on the House Oversight Committee is we are going to continue to follow the facts. And wherever those facts may go, we're going to go. And everything is on the table up to an impeachment inquiry, so we can really get to the bottom of all of this. These are serious allegations, and at the end of the day, people don't trust our institutions, and it causes a lot of problems. You go back to the 60s, trust in government was in the 60% range. A lot of trust in the federal government. It's never been lower than it is today. And I want to be a part, and I suspect you do too, I want to be a part of building that trust back. But the only way we can build trust back is to level with the American people, tell them the truth, tell them what happened, and then hold people accountable. to ensure that it doesn't happen again. And so I think that's what this is about. I think it's what it's about when it comes to Joe Biden. I think it's what it's about as we talk about, Secretary Mayorkas. It's our job to oversee the administration, regardless of party. Congress's job is to oversee what the executive branch is doing. And we owe it to our constituents to do a good and thorough job, and we're going to keep doing it.
Walk us through the impeachment inquiry process. As far as you know, this is not a done deal by any means, but if we go to that level, how does that work?
Well, so I'm not an expert on this. The Committee on Justice will have a lot to do with this. If we go down that path, though, the point of it is, and the reason the Speaker said inquiry, is that it gives us greater abilities to investigate and find out what's happening.
Through subpoena power of the Congress.
Yeah, exactly. We have subpoena power in the Oversight Committee, and we've used it judiciously. I think that the same thing would have to happen in an impeachment inquiry. I'll give you a great example of, I think, Chairman Comer of the Oversight Committee doing a good job, and I think it's how we should conduct ourselves going forward no matter what happens. We've been reasonable about what documents we've asked for. We have subpoenaed documents when we've needed to. We had an example where Director Wray didn't want to provide documentation specific to a company in Ukraine that Hunter Biden was being paid by. He didn't want to turn over the document, a non-classified document, incidentally. And so we said we're going to hold Director Wray in contempt of Congress. We were going to hold the vote the next day, and lo and behold, that night he gives us the document. And so it's one of those things that you want to be judicious with, because you don't want to use these things willy-nilly. You don't want it to become precedent for people to thumb their nose at Congress and giving us information and giving us testimony. I think that that's important. I think it's also important to protect whistleblowers. When we have whistleblowers come forward and tell us, like we did with the IRS or like we did with the UFOs, when we have whistleblowers coming forward to tell us what's going on in this vast labyrinth that is the executive branch, we need to listen to them and make sure they're protected.
You talked about trust and really the mistrust of, every facet of our society now. People do not trust the government. People do not trust the media. People do not trust law enforcement, especially federal law enforcement. How have we gotten to that point in our nation where there's so much mistrust of the basics of our society, and how do we go about recapturing that and rebuilding it? I know you said part of it's transparency.
I think part of it is transparency. I mentioned earlier the 60s, and look at what transpired over that period of time. We had the Vietnam War, hugely controversial at the time. The 60s were a time of assassination of a lot of our national leaders. We had Watergate in the 70s. People less and less trust the federal government, and now we've had. You were a news guy for
35 years.
35 years. It used to be you turned on the nightly news, and that was the information you got. You got your paper in the morning, you got the nightly news, and that's how you formed your opinions. And now we have so many different forms of media, and I think that that's for good and for bad. For good, when the mainstream media has lost their way and gone the way of the liberals, conservatives have alternatives, which I think is great. For the bad, that sometimes the truth has to compete with a lot of lies out there. And I think that harms our institutions. And I think we've had leaders in institutions that don't level with the American people, and I think it's a tremendous problem. Joe Biden is the best example of this. You mentioned the media hasn't been willing to cover a lot of what's been happening with Hunter Biden. And we have seen the damage that does. The media, the mainstream media has acted as they want to be mom and dad to the American people.
Right.
Well, we'll tell you what you need to know. We'll decide. We'll analyze what this means, and then let you know. And we've seen the enormous bias that exists.
Well, I think part of it, the media did not like Trump because he went after them, especially CNN. And instead of just playing it cool and not taking a side, not being defensive, the media fought back, and that should never have been the media's job. Just tell what goes on.
Right.
It's not your job to put a spin on it.
Yeah.
And
What's that old show? Just the facts, ma'am.
just the facts.
That's what you want.
Yeah. And so I think that kind of led to some of the mistrust in the media, that they felt like they had to fight back against President Trump because they felt like he was lying. He was not representing the truth. And I think they just kind of lost their way. Real quick, recruitment in the military is at an all-time low. 9% of young people feel like they want to even join the military. What is great about America? Why should someone join the military to fight and possibly die for our country?
Because this is the greatest country in the history of the world. Our founders understood that our rights come from God and not from the government. They believed in the separation of powers. They believed in the rule of law. And they understood human nature and set up a form of government that protects against that to the extent humanly possible. And so we have checks and balances, and we are unique in human history. We really are. And this is worth preserving. The greatest country in the history of the world. It's worth preserving that legacy. And to be frank with you, there's nowhere else to go.
Exactly.
We have to fight for this country. My kids deserve it. Grandkids deserve it. Kids deserve it. We have to fight for this country. It's worth fighting for.
Jake, we got to go. Thank you so much for being with
Thanks
us
for
today.
having me.
I appreciate you. Hey, folks, we'll talk again. Until next week, remember, I believe in you. I believe our best days are still ahead of us, and yes, I believe in America.